So a few days ago, I was looking through my old high school yearbook just to reminisce. I'm not someone who feels particularly nostalgic for those days, but sometimes you find yourself wanting to revisit old memories, even the bad ones. So I'm flipping through this book and I get to the page with all of the photos and the goofy quotes, and I see my name, but the picture above is of someone that I don't recognize. It's this skinny kid with bleached blonde hair. He's tired, he's got bags under his eyes, and he just looks down. He can't even crack a fucking smile in this photo that people are going to be looking back on for years. But it's me. It's a version of me that I left behind 4 years ago. I've had a couple of people say to me since leaving school that I'm the person who's changed the most, and that it's not just a physical change. It's a change in my personality. It's a change in the energy I bring, a positive outlook on life. And I won't lie to you, things are hard right now. Things are pretty uncertain for me. But there are days when I wake up and I feel just on top of the world. Like I can accomplish anything that I set my mind to. I like to think I'm someone who doesn't have many regrets. But I'll be honest with you, if I could go back to school with all of the knowledge and foresight that I have now, there are a lot of things that I would do differently. This current generation of teenagers, your generation, is dealing with a set of problems that we haven't ever faced before. Your parents, your teachers, they haven't got a fucking clue. They don't know what it's like to be mentally fucked from all angles by information. They didn't have to worry about things like social media and porn addiction. They weren't going into school with this near constant anxiety and feeling like something bad is going to happen. I was such an awkward and shy kid at school, and it took a really long time for me to learn how to like myself. I'll be honest with you, there were plenty of times where I thought that it would be better for everyone if I wasn't around anymore, which seems fucking crazy considering how good life is right now. I didn't realize this at the time. I didn't have to wait until I left to learn these lessons. You have the power to make high school some of the best times of your life right now. So please don't waste these years. If I were between the ages of 13 and 18, here's what I would do. So first things first, I want to talk about self-image. And this is going to sound like some cliche shit, but one of the hardest things about being a teenager is you don't know who you are. You're in that weird stage where you're not a kid. You're not living life on easy mode anymore, and you probably don't want it that way. You probably want the freedom to make some of your own decisions and just do whatever you want. But you can't because you've got no money and your parents are overprotective as fuck. You can't go and explore the world and figure out what you like, what you're good at, because right now you're just an extension of your parents. You're totally dependent on them, so until you move out, you really won't have much of an identity. So what usually happens when you don't have enough life experience to know who you are? You let other people decide for you. You know how in school you've got these tiers of popularity? Like at the top you've got the extra popular kids, the ones who get invited to all the parties, who everyone wants to be friends with. And then just below them you have the slightly less popular groups, but you know, they're still fairly well liked. And then at the bottom of the pile, you've got the social rejects, you've got the outcasts, the kids who are getting bullied, who no one wants to be seen with. Don't you think it's absolutely crazy that no one says a word about this as it's going on? Like, it's not as if we're being picked out of a lineup and being told he's popular and you're not. It's not something that works like that, is it? But like over time, we're subconsciously grouping ourselves into different categories of social standing. I think that's really interesting. You know how in school we're really obsessed with how everyone else sees us, and also how we compare to the next guy. Do I have as many friends as him? Have I got the new Nike Air Maxes that everyone has right now? How come he's on the first team for basketball and I'm not? Now, it might look like something different at your school, but these are all popularity metrics. These are all boxes that we can check off, and the more we do of that, then the more accepted we'll be. But what I think is really interesting, it's these things that determine where we fall on this social ladder, or it's how we compare to other people in these things. Like when it's an upwards comparison, you're comparing yourself to that other person who is more successful in this particular area than you. Like the easy one that comes to mind is, this person has more friends than me. And that usually doesn't make you feel very good, does it? You start to question, why them and not me? But at the same time, it works downwards as well. You know, you might not have a lot of friends, but at least you're not that guy. You know, the guy who sits on his own at lunch. You know, he's inferior to you. He's a way for you to reassure yourself that things could be worse. So by acknowledging that there's people who are more popular than you and less popular than you simultaneously, you've already placed yourself on this social ladder. You've decided that this is where I'm meant to be. This is your attempt at figuring out who you are and where you fit into the world. The problem is these things that we're using to measure popularity, they're meaningless. They're some useless fucking standard that doesn't make anyone happy, but we'll still follow it just because We don't want to be the guy at the bottom. Your self-image is the way that you see yourself, the type of person that you perceive yourself to be. But you know what happens when you believe that everyone sees you in a certain way? You become it. And that's unfortunately what happened to me as a guy very close to the bottom of the social hierarchy. So I've told you I was pretty shy and awkward in school. If the teacher picked on me to ask me a question, my face would turn red, I'd start stuttering. I didn't really chat to people outside of my core friend group. And because of that, I got picked on. I was inferior in the eyes of some people. I had a reputation as this kid who was dead quiet, who never really said anything. People used to joke that they didn't know who I was. I remember at one point the whole year group was in on this joke and I used to get stopped and people would ask me, "Are you new here?" And knowing that so many people saw me this way, I began to believe that that must be the truth. This must be how I am. I'm just this quiet kid. That's not something I can change. You know, that's the way everyone saw me. That's the way everyone treated me. So that's the way I acted. I let other people define my self-image. So I'm going to pause this video for a moment and ask you to do something a little bit weird. I've just given you this high-level breakdown of human nature and how social hierarchies are formed. What I want you to do right now is forget. Just cast all of that out of your mind. I want you to hit the reset button because this whole social hierarchy thing, the system of popularity, the way other people see you, is meaningless. It's made up. I find it really ironic that we're so obsessed with how other people see us because that's one of the only things in life that we have no control over. People are going to hate and drag you down no matter what you do. So there's no point living your life based on some made up rule set. The only thing you can do, the only thing you can really control is the way you see yourself. I think one of the best habits to develop early on in life is the ability to question your own beliefs. For me, that would have been, am I actually shy or are just half the people in my year fucking dickheads who I don't feel comfortable opening up to? Am I really awkward or have I just never challenged myself socially or tried speaking to people that I don't know? Imagine if I still had that belief today, how much it would have damaged me, how much it would have gotten in the way of my goals. Do you think I'd be able to sit here and talk confidently in front of a camera? Definitely fucking not. If you don't question these irrational beliefs while you can, I'm not even joking, it can genuinely fuck up your life. Also, instead of constantly comparing yourself to others and living your life based on someone else's made up rule set, you need to set your own goals. Ideally something that's going to challenge one of these self-limiting beliefs that you have. Something that you thought you could never do in a million years. For me, it was getting jacked because I'd always been this skinny kid. I'd always been like under 150 pounds, just getting pushed over by these older kids in school. So after I finished, I just started hitting all these home workouts. I had abs in about 2 weeks. And now 3 years later, I'm like 40 pounds heavier. I actually feel like a fucking man instead of some little victim who's getting picked on. It's up to you to make your own identity. Don't let anyone make it for you. Now, the other lesson I want to pass on to you is something that I think every single teenager needs to hear. And I think it highlights one of the big underlying problems with our education system and maybe even our society as a whole. So listen, outside of being unpopular and shy, I was also never a good student. And I don't know if that will come as a surprise to you because usually it's the kids with less of a social life that end up doing better academically, but for me it was never the case. I was always just getting straight C's and D's, only doing enough just to get by. Actually, it was worse than that. I remember one of the last exams I ever took, I was 18, right before I finished school. It was business studies, and I got a U. If you don't know what that is, it stands for ungraded. It's worse than a fucking F. It's the worst grade you could get. And I remember being in total disbelief. I'd done everything that the teacher had told me. I'd sat down with my textbook and studied for hours. I'd gone to all these voluntary study sessions that the teacher had been running. And I still came out with as bad a grade as you could get. I could have fallen asleep in the exam, or even better, not even turned up, and I would have still gotten the same grade. The only reason that I was able to go to university was because my final exams got cancelled because of COVID. Like, I know that was a very bad time for a lot of people, but it's things like that that make me think I have like a higher power watching over me because I would have failed every single one of those exams. But something interesting happened when I went off to university and had to learn how to manage my own time. I started doing very well in all of my assignments. Not just very well, but best in the class. I was getting the best grade out of everyone. And you know what was very strange for me about that time? I was studying a whole lot less than I was in high school. All because of a couple of things that I learned over that period that I wish I'd learned years earlier because they would have totally transformed my life at high school. And I'm going to share those with you now. But before that, a huge problem that I have with this current system of education is that they don't value your time. Or rather, they don't have faith in your ability to learn independently, which is why they force you to sit through all these lessons in which you're supervised. Even when your teacher is fucking boring and they don't know how to do their job in an engaging way. Even when the kid next to you is fucking spazzing out and just being super distracting. Even when you know you'd be 10 times more effective on your own, a 20-minute lesson gets dragged out into an hour. And there have been studies that show that independent learning is better for students, even when they're all still in the same room together. The kid can be doing independent study on an iPad, and that's much better because he's allowed to make progress at his own pace rather than a whole room of mixed ability kids getting taught the same thing. But your teachers, and to some extent your parents, have brainwashed you, have conditioned you to believe that the best way to learn, to get stuff done, is to sit in front of a fucking textbook for 5 hours straight. And that in turn makes you associate the whole experience of learning and education with boredom and burnout. That's why like 90% of teenagers haven't picked up a book in their spare time in 5 years. I want you to abandon that entire belief right now, all of that conditioning, because that all or nothing mindset when it comes to learning is the thing that destroyed my relationship with doing any kind of work for years. And the thing that resurrected it was realizing that to get the top grades, you don't actually have to study that much. Maybe no more than 2 hours a day. So listen up, because I'm about to change everything for you. The two important realizations that you need to have is that first, focus is a skill, and secondly, delayed gratification is king. So let me break those down one by one for you. So firstly, no one thinks of focus as a skill. They think of it as something that just comes and goes as it pleases. That was definitely the case for me. I could be deep in thought and then a notification on my phone would go off and I'd lose it. And I used to think that way until I read this book called Deep Work. Now that's a book that I'd recommend to any teenager on the planet. It's full of life-changing insights. It's probably the most impactful book I've ever read. But basically, after reading that book, I realized that the reason I was getting such shit grades wasn't because I was naturally dumb. It was because I was incredibly trash at this skill of focus. You know, I was the type of kid who'd be constantly daydreaming all day, every day, very overstimulated, always refreshing Instagram for some fucking meme. Point being, my brain was working against me every second of the day, and I couldn't focus for more than like 15 minutes at a time. But through deep work, you can increase your brain's ability to focus for longer periods of time. So instead of studying for 5 hours, being distracted, burnt out, not really retaining much information, you can do 2 hours uninterrupted, focused work and get the same amount done or even more. And this is an absolute fucking game changer if you're like me and you've never been academically gifted in the traditional sense. And the way you can train this is by every day, starting with an hour, schedule an uninterrupted deep work session where you just put on the timer and throw yourself into your work. You might suck at first, you might find yourself distracted all the time or getting low quality work done. But the point is, if you stay consistent, you'll gradually boost your brain's ability to focus for longer. Now, the second thing is to practice delayed gratification. I'm going to keep this pretty simple. If you're checking your phone every 5 seconds, there's no chance you're getting anything done. And it's the same thing if you immediately come home and hop on video games, even though you know there's work to be done. Like, it sounds obvious, but you're doing it in the wrong order. The video game should be the reward for completing the hard task, but instead of doing that first, you're snatching up the reward without earning it. And honestly, it won't feel as nice because you'll always have that anxious thought in the back of your mind that you still have work to do. If you can learn to delay the gratification until after completing that hard task, maybe through combining it with deep work, then you'll get ahead of 99% of losers your age who are complaining that things are too hard when they're just wasting their life on social media. You'll be able to get all of your schoolwork out of the way in like 1 or 2 hours and free up time for what's really important to you. And if you think this is just a study tip, then you're wrong, because if you can use this to become the highest performing student, then you can use it to start a business, to get any job you want, really anything you can think of. And this is the last piece of advice that I have to give you. The best time to start is right now. I used to get so worried and anxious about the future, about what job I'm going to do, whether I'd make something of myself or fail miserably. And all that time, I never took action on shit. I never tried to take control of my life. And now that I'm using my spare time productively, trying to build a business, the only regret I have is that I didn't start sooner. Bro, if I started this shit at 13, I'd be a millionaire by now. I'd be living my dream life. You're living life on easy mode right now. You haven't got to pay rent or work a job 365 days a year. Your parents cook all your meals. You get a fucking allowance. Being young is sick. School is only 6 hours out of your day and you need 8 of those to sleep. So you can do the bare minimum and invest 2 hours of your day into leveling up a skill or working on a side hustle instead of playing video games. At the bare minimum, you can work out for an hour a day and build a better looking body than 80% of people. The best time to start is right now. And you know why that is? It's because you can afford to fuck up. And you might not have that luxury in 10 years. If you stayed this long, then you might as well subscribe so we can keep spreading this message to more of the people who need it. Look after yourself, bro. I'll see you in the next one.